I never imagined that what I thought was the greatest love of my life would end up destroying me this way. Marriage is a journey of promises, shared dreams, but also moments of weakness and wrong choices. I thought he was the man I would spend my whole life with, building memories and overcoming challenges together. But reality, as it always does, proved to be different. When I found out about the betrayal, it felt like the ground just disappeared beneath my feet. Everything I believed we had built, trust, affection, partnership, crumbled in seconds. How could someone you love, with whom you share so much, just forget it all and give their life, their promises, to someone else? I felt like a stranger in my own life, as if the years spent with him meant nothing, as if I had been blind all along. It wasn't just the act of betrayal that hurt me, it was the way he looked at me, how he used me, as if I was a second option. I spent days, weeks, trying to understand why he did what he did, asking myself where I went wrong, where all those dreams we built together went. But at the same time, something inside me began to change. It wasn't overnight, but little by little, I started to realize that the pain I was feeling didn't have to define me. I was suffering, yes, but I was also learning to be stronger. And the decision to move on, despite all the pain, was one of the hardest of my life. 5 months had passed since that day, and everything seemed to have settled into place. Or, at least I was trying. But life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Then he called, and all he had to say was that his new girlfriend didn't even come close to me. It's hard to explain how I felt in that moment. A mix of anger, hurt, and maybe a hint of curiosity. That phone call became an emotional bomb, and I didn't know what to do with it all. If you're curious to know what happened next, stay with me on this journey. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe because the story is just beginning and I have so much more to share. When he called me, the first thing I thought was that I was dreaming. It couldn't be real. I had blocked his number months ago, after everything that happened, because I knew I couldn't deal with another lie, another empty word. I wasn't ready to hear what he had to say. But when I looked at the phone screen and saw his name, my heart skipped an unexpected beat. A mix of anger, surprise, and something I couldn't identify. For a second, it felt like all that pain came rushing back, all the memories and emotions from the past, blending into something uncontrollable. I hesitated for a moment. I knew what he wanted. He wanted another chance. But at the same time, something inside me told me it was more than that. He didn't have the courage to reach out before, didn't have the sensitivity to see the pain he caused. So why now? What had changed? I didn't want to be an option for consolation. Not after everything. I took a deep breath and, not knowing what to expect, I answered. The first thing he said was something that left me stunned. I made a mistake and I'm sorry. I recognize what I lost. And at that moment, sadness took over me. Because deep down, I knew he was only saying that because he was unhappy, because he regretted leaving me behind. He started talking about the new woman, how she wasn't like me. And even with all the pain he caused me, I felt a different kind of hurt when I heard that. How could he think I cared about what he thought of her? How did he still think that would matter to me? But at the same time, there was something in his words that made me question. He said that his new girlfriend couldn't do anything around the house, that she didn't have the qualities I had, as if that was some kind of consolation for me. He wanted me to know that I was better. He was trying to justify what he did, to try to convince me that he made a wrong choice. And in a way, he was giving me the recognition I always wanted, but in such a twisted and painful way that I didn't know what to do with it. I tried not to give in. I tried not to let myself feel sorry for him, or convince myself that he was really sorry. I knew that the pain he caused me was deeper than a simple apology. He betrayed me. He left me. He broke something that seemed unbreakable. And all he could offer now was an empty phrase about regret. He recognized me now? After everything? I was living my life trying to rebuild, and he showed up out of nowhere, wanting me to accept him again? But when he said he recognized everything he had lost, something inside me broke. I remembered what it was like when we were together, the plans we made, the dreams we shared, how he seemed like the only one who understood what I needed. For a moment, almost like an illusion, I found myself wishing it was true, that he was really sorry and wanted to come back, but reality hit me hard. He was sorry for losing the woman I used to be, the woman he thought he had at his disposal, not the woman I had become. I was stronger, more independent, more centered. I didn't need him to feel whole. Then, almost unintentionally, he asked the question I knew would come, but somehow still caught me off guard. "Do you still love me?" He wanted to know if there was any chance we could start over. And at that moment, all I wanted was to scream that no, I didn't love that man anymore, that he had no right to ask me that after everything he had done. But at the same time, something stopped me. It was like I had to be honest with myself more than with him. I didn't know what I felt anymore. I didn't know if I still loved him, but I knew that the love I felt for him was wrapped in pain and resentment. I didn't know if I could go back. I asked myself in that moment, what would you do if it were you? How would you react? Would you let him come back to try to rebuild something that was already broken? Or would you be strong enough to move on, even with all the weight of what had happened? I know that many of us, when we live through something like this, feel torn between the desire to be loved again and the fear of being hurt even more. So, I'd love to hear from you. What would you do if it were you? Leave your comments here. I'd love to know how you would handle a situation like this. I didn't know what to do yet, but something inside me told me that the best thing was to move on. Not for him, but for myself. I deserved better, something more real, something that would make me happy. I didn't want to live in the shadow of what he did to me. And more than ever, I knew that the decision to move on wasn't just to get away from him, but to reclaim myself. To show myself that I am capable of living without depending on a love that, in the end, wasn't enough. Now, looking back, I see that that phone call was an opportunity to close a chapter, a last attempt from him to get something back that, deep down, he knew he couldn't anymore. I was stronger. I was healed. And above all, I was ready to move on with my life without any more regrets. As the days went by after that phone call, I found myself grappling with emotions I hadn't anticipated. There were moments when I thought I had it all figured out, when I convinced myself that I was strong enough to move on, that his words meant nothing, and that I was better off without him. But then there were other moments when I felt as though the ground beneath me was shifting, and the walls I'd built around my heart seemed to be crumbling down. There was a part of me, the part that still remembered the man I once loved, that wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he truly regretted what he did, that he had changed, and that somehow we could go back to the way things used to be. But the reality was that I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't erase the betrayal, the heartache, the countless nights spent wondering what I had done wrong. No matter how much he claimed to miss me or how much he said he had learned his lesson, the damage had been done. The trust was shattered, and once trust is broken, it's impossible to rebuild it in the same way. I remember walking around my apartment, feeling like a stranger in my own space. It was as though the whole world had turned upside down, and I couldn't find my footing. I had spent years building a life with him, a life that I thought was built on love and mutual respect. But everything had changed in an instant. I kept replaying that phone call in my mind, over and over again. I tried to make sense of what he had said, tried to understand what he was really asking of me. Was he truly sorry? Did he really want me back? Or was he just lonely and regretting his decision? I couldn't tell. And honestly, I wasn't sure it even mattered anymore. I had given so much of myself to him, had sacrificed so many of my own desires and needs for the sake of our relationship, that I wasn't sure I had anything left to give. I had spent so many years trying to make things work, trying to fix what wasn't even mine to fix, that I had lost sight of who I was. I had forgotten how to take care of myself, how to prioritize my own happiness. And when I finally realized that, it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I started to focus on myself again, on the things that brought me joy, on the things that made me feel whole. I went out with friends, reconnected with hobbies I had abandoned, and even started taking better care of my health. Little by little, I started to feel like myself again, like the woman I had been before all of this. It wasn't easy. There were days when the sadness crept back in, when I would find myself longing for the life I thought I would have with him. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between, and I was learning to accept that this chapter of my life was over. I had to let go, not because I didn't still care for him, but because I knew I couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't meant to be. Letting go didn't mean I had to forget the good times we had, or the love that once existed between us. It just meant that I had to stop holding on to the past and start building a future that was mine and mine alone. I began to realize that my happiness couldn't depend on him or anyone else. It had to come from within me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from the weight of betrayal, free from the doubts that had consumed me for months, and free from the fear of being alone. I wasn't alone. I had myself, and that was enough. I still don't know if I'll ever fully understand why he did what he did. I don't know if I'll ever get the closure I was hoping for, or if I'll ever truly know if he was sincere in his regrets. But what I do know is that I'm no longer waiting for answers from him. I'm no longer waiting for someone else to give me the validation I've always sought. I've learned to validate myself, to acknowledge my worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. Moving on wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending like it didn't hurt. It was about accepting the truth of what happened, embracing the pain, and using it to fuel my growth. I've become a stronger, more resilient version of myself, and while I still have moments of weakness, I know that I am capable of handling whatever comes my way. I'm finally at peace with the decision to let go. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. And now, for the first time in a long time, I can honestly say that I'm looking forward to what the future holds. I never imagined that what I thought was the greatest love of my life would end up destroying me this way. Marriage is a journey of promises, shared dreams, but also moments of weakness and wrong choices. I thought he was the man I would spend my whole life with, building memories and overcoming challenges together. But reality, as it always does, proved to be different. When I found out about the betrayal, it felt like the ground just disappeared beneath my feet. Everything I believed we had built, trust, affection, partnership, crumbled in seconds. How could someone you love, with whom you share so much, just forget it all and give their life, their promises, to someone else? I felt like a stranger in my own life, as if the years spent with him meant nothing, as if I had been blind all along. It wasn't just the act of betrayal that hurt me, it was the way he looked at me, how he used me, as if I was a second option. I spent days, weeks, trying to understand why he did what he did, asking myself where I went wrong, where all those dreams we built together went. But at the same time, something inside me began to change. It wasn't overnight, but little by little, I started to realize that the pain I was feeling didn't have to define me. I was suffering, yes, but I was also learning to be stronger. And the decision to move on, despite all the pain, was one of the hardest of my life. 5 months had passed since that day, and everything seemed to have settled into place. Or, at least I was trying. But life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Then he called, and all he had to say was that his new girlfriend didn't even come close to me. It's hard to explain how I felt in that moment. A mix of anger, hurt, and maybe a hint of curiosity. That phone call became an emotional bomb, and I didn't know what to do with it all. If you're curious to know what happened next, stay with me on this journey. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe because the story is just beginning and I have so much more to share. The more I reflected on everything that had happened, the clearer it became that the true challenge wasn't just about letting go of him, but letting go of the version of myself I had become while I was with him. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to the idea of who we were, who I was when I was with him. I had built an identity around our relationship, around what we were supposed to be together. But the truth was, that version of me was gone. The life I had once envisioned for myself, the life I thought I would have with him, was slipping through my fingers, and all I could do was watch it fade away. But I had to accept that sometimes things fall apart so that something better can take their place. And as painful as that was, I understood that it wasn't just about losing him, it was about finding myself again. It was about rediscovering who I was without him. In the beginning, after everything happened, I felt as though I had lost a part of myself. I had given so much of my energy, my love, and my heart to a person who had betrayed me, And in doing so, I had lost touch with who I was. But over time, I started to remember the woman I had been before him. I remembered the passions I had forgotten, the goals I had set aside, the dreams I had buried under the weight of trying to make him happy. And as I reconnected with those pieces of myself, I began to realize that I wasn't broken. I wasn't incomplete. I was whole. Even without him, I didn't need his approval, his validation, or his presence to feel valuable. I didn't need him to tell me I was worthy. I was already worthy, simply because I existed. It took me a long time to truly believe that, but when I did, everything changed. I stopped seeking external validation, and instead, I began to find my worth within myself. I started to trust my own instincts, to make decisions based on what felt right for me, not what others expected of me. I realized that for so long, I had been living for someone else. I had been living to make him happy, to meet his needs, to fulfill his desires. But in doing that, I had neglected myself. I had neglected my own happiness, my own needs, and my own dreams. And that was a mistake I couldn't keep making. I had to start living for me and not for anyone else. As I moved forward, I encountered moments where I felt uncertain, where I questioned if I was making the right choices, but those moments became fewer and farther between. With each decision I made that was true to myself, with each step I took that brought me closer to the woman I was becoming, I felt more confident, more at peace. I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. I wasn't afraid of the future. I knew that I could handle whatever came my way. The pain of betrayal, the hurt of losing someone I loved, was no longer controlling me. It was no longer defining me. It was a part of my story, yes, but it was no longer the entire story. I had started to write my own chapters, and they were filled with strength, resilience, and hope. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn during this journey was that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending that it never happened. Moving on means accepting what happened, understanding the pain, and using that pain to fuel your growth. It means taking the lessons you've learned from the hurt and using them to become a better, stronger version of yourself. And that's exactly what I had done. The woman I was now was not the same woman I had been when he left. I was different in the best possible way. I had learned to embrace my flaws, my imperfections, and my scars. They were a part of me, and I was no longer ashamed of them. They were proof of my resilience, proof of my strength. I had faced one of the most painful experiences of my life, and I had survived. I had come out of it not broken, but transformed. And as I looked to the future, I no longer felt fear. I felt anticipation. I felt excitement. The possibilities were endless. There were still moments when I thought of him, when I wondered how he was doing, if he had changed, if he was happy. But I no longer let those thoughts consume me. They were just fleeting moments, passing through my mind, and I didn't dwell on them. I had moved on, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I wanted to be free. I wanted to be happy. And I was learning every day that happiness didn't depend on anyone else. It depended on me. As the months passed, I started to realize that the pain of the past no longer had a hold on me. I had let it go, and I had learned to love myself again. I had learned to trust myself again. And in doing so, I had opened myself up to the possibility of new beginnings, new opportunities, and new experiences. I had learned that life goes on, even after the darkest moments. And with that realization came a sense of peace, a sense of freedom, and a sense of hope for the future. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was already complete. And that in itself was the greatest gift I could give myself. As time passed, I began to notice something inside me that had shifted in ways I hadn't expected. I wasn't just healing, I was growing. The woman I had become was someone who had learned to stand on her own, to take ownership of her life, and to embrace the idea that my happiness was something I controlled, not something dependent on someone else. The more I focused on myself, the more I realized how much I had neglected my own needs in the past, how much I had poured into someone else's life, while forgetting to nurture my own. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal that had held me back all those months. It was my tendency to look outward for validation, for approval. I had spent so much time trying to prove my worth to someone who had never truly valued it. And now, I was learning to value myself. I had become my own source of strength, my own source of validation. I wasn't waiting for anyone to give me permission to live the life I wanted. I was starting to live it for myself. But there were still moments, quiet and unexpected, when the memories of him would sneak up on me. I would catch myself thinking about the life we might have had, about the future we once dreamed of, and the emptiness would threaten to swallow me again. It wasn't that I wanted him back. It wasn't even about him. It was about the life I thought I was supposed to have. It was about the version of myself I had lost in that relationship. The woman who was willing to sacrifice everything for love, for the sake of making someone else happy. I remembered her, but I no longer recognized her. And I knew I didn't want to be her again. It wasn't an easy realization. It meant confronting the truth about myself, the truth that I had given too much of myself away, that I had let myself be defined by someone else's love, by someone else's choices. It meant acknowledging the mistakes I had made, the compromises I had made in order to keep the relationship intact. And as hard as it was to admit, I had to come to terms with the fact that I had stayed in that relationship for far longer than I should have, because I was afraid of being alone, afraid of not being enough. But I was no longer afraid. I had learned that I was more than enough. I had spent so much of my life trying to make someone else see my worth, and now I was starting to see it myself. I didn't need him to validate me anymore. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was enough, because I had already proven that to myself. I had learned to be my own biggest supporter, to be my own biggest advocate. And as I embraced this newfound sense of self, I found that my life started to take on a new meaning. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was living. I was living for myself, not for anyone else. The things that once held me back, the doubts, the fears, the insecurities, they started to fade into the background. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't expect to be. I still had moments of weakness, moments where I questioned myself and my choices, but I was no longer paralyzed by those moments. I could face them with a sense of understanding, knowing that they didn't define me. I had learned to love myself through the mistakes, through the heartbreak, through the loss. And that, more than anything else, had given me the freedom to move forward. But even as I moved forward, there were still times when I had to confront the lingering feelings of doubt and uncertainty. I wondered if I would ever truly be able to trust again, if I would ever be able to open my heart fully to someone else. I thought about the possibility of love, but the fear of being hurt again was always there, lurking in the background. And yet, I knew that I couldn't let that fear dictate my future. I couldn't live my life in fear of what might happen, of what could go wrong. I had already been through the worst. What could possibly scare me now? Slowly but surely, I began to open myself up to new experiences. I started to let people in again, not in the way I had before, not with the same expectations or the same need for validation, but in a way that was healthier, more balanced. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me anymore. I was looking for someone to share my life with, someone who would add to the happiness I had already found within myself. The idea of love no longer felt like a desperate need, but rather a beautiful possibility. I wasn't searching for it anymore. I was allowing it to come to me when the time was right. And as I allowed that space for love, I realized that I wasn't just opening myself up to others, but to myself. I was learning to embrace every part of who I was, the strengths, the flaws, the victories, the scars. All of it was part of my story, part of my journey, and none of it made me any less worthy of happiness. In fact, it made me more worthy because I had survived, because I had learned, because I had grown. And in that growth, I had become someone who could truly love, not just another person, but myself. As I moved through the weeks, something started to shift inside me. I wasn't just healing anymore. I was evolving. The pain that had consumed me for so long, the heartache that had felt like a constant weight on my chest, began to lighten. It didn't happen overnight, but there was a subtle transformation happening that I couldn't ignore. I began to see the world through different eyes. The scars from my past were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had learned to carry them with a sense of pride, not shame, because they were proof of my resilience. proof that I had endured something unimaginable and come out the other side stronger. I had spent so long living in the shadow of what had happened, trying to piece together a life that was shattered, but now I realized that I wasn't just trying to rebuild what was lost. I was building something new, something entirely mine. Something that was based on the lessons I had learned and the strength I had gained.
It was hard, though.
The path to self-acceptance, to truly feeling at peace with myself, was not a straight line. There were days when I doubted myself, days when I wondered if I was making the right choices, days when the past seemed to come rushing back in waves. But with each day, I grew stronger, more certain of who I was becoming. And then, one evening, as I was sitting in the quiet of my home, it hit me. I had done it. I had moved on. Not just from him, but from everything he represented. I wasn't just free from the past. I was free to create my own future, one that wasn't defined by what had happened or by the choices someone else had made. I could finally breathe without feeling suffocated by my own pain. For the first time in so long, I felt like I could actually start living again. I was no longer defined by the heartbreak, no longer defined by the betrayal. I was defined by my own journey, by the woman I had become. And that woman was strong, capable, and worthy of happiness. I wasn't the same person I was when all of this started. I was someone new, someone who had learned to love herself and trust herself. I wasn't looking for approval from anyone else anymore. I had found my worth within myself. I didn't need anyone to validate my existence or tell me I was enough. I knew that I was enough. And as I realized that, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had fought my way through the darkness, and now I was standing in the light. I was finally free to pursue the life I had always dreamed of, free to love again, but this time, with the understanding that my love for myself came first. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't expect perfection from anyone else. But I had learned that the most important relationship I would ever have was the one with myself. I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I was already complete. I had learned to love myself, to embrace my flaws, my imperfections, and to be at peace with who I was. And that was the greatest gift I could give myself. I had stopped searching for someone to fill the emptiness inside me because I had realized that emptiness wasn't something that needed to be filled. It was something that needed to be understood, accepted, and transformed. And once I had done that, everything changed. Life wasn't perfect, and it didn't have to be. But it was mine, and that was enough. I had stopped looking backward and started looking forward. I had stopped living for someone else and started living for me. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, moments where I might stumble or doubt myself, but I also knew that I was strong enough to face them. I had proven that to myself. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally living on my own terms. So, as I reflect on this journey, I want to take a moment to share this with all of you. If you've been through something similar, if you've experienced the pain of betrayal or loss, I want you to know that you're not alone. This journey isn't easy, but it's worth it. And if you're still fighting, still wondering if you can move on, let me tell you, you can. You will. And you'll be stronger for it. If you're finding strength in my story, if it's resonating with you in some way, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel and keep these stories alive. Let's continue this journey together, share our experiences, and give a voice to those who have suffered in silence. Your thoughts, your comments, and your stories matter. Please take a moment to leave a comment. Tell me what you've been through, how you've healed, or what your journey has looked like. Let's continue to preserve these memories and remind ourselves that we are not defined by what has happened to us, but by how we choose to rise above it. And if you're looking for more stories like mine, stories of pain, healing, and hope, make sure to check out the playlist. You'll find more stories that I believe will speak to your heart. The link will be in the description or in the pinned comment. Let's keep sharing, keep supporting each other, and keep moving forward together. We're in this together, and the best is yet to come.